Welcome to Hypnotic Authenticity. This is a place to reflect, a place to unwind perhaps, to understand yourself a little better, and to gently reshape the patterns that guide your life. A little bit like a conversation between you and your deeper self. So I'm offering a sprinkling of hypnosis, insight, some meditative guidance, and it's all going to be woven throughout a deep sense of practicality, so that if I do my job well, each episode is going to help you feel more grounded, also more open, and more authentically you. So if you're ready, let's begin. I'm going to talk today about why hypnotherapy works. Now, I reckon this took me around about 6 years now to be able to enunciate, which in itself is extraordinary, right? But the reason for that is because I wanted to be able to express what hypnosis is, what's going on in hypnotherapy, and why it works. What are the mechanisms by which it works? The reasons why it's more beneficial than meditation, let's say, in a way that fits with my experience, that fits with my understanding, but that other people could most likely get. And it turns out that's taken a while. Because if you look, well, you can find as many different definitions of what hypnosis is as there are hypnotists. And that in itself is a fascinating thing. Okay. And I struggled with this. I struggled with this for a long time because it's very hard to put into words a felt sense. It's very hard to describe in words what it is to be in the present moment. And so I brought along this little guy, right? I brought along a pendulum to kind of demonstrate a little bit about what hypnosis isn't and what we kind of thought it was, and why I feel so comfortable with my explanation of what's going on. But do bear in mind that this is my explanation, my story. It fits my parameters based upon my current level of awareness, of being able to describe my experience. So let me give you the punchline straight away. The punchline is, what's going on with hypnosis is that someone is able to stop objectifying themselves to a certain extent, stop objectifying their problem to a certain extent, to relate to themselves rather than objectifying themselves. So to come into what some people kind of call a state of flow, to actually be present, and therefore to be able to come up with a different set of conclusions based around a felt sense rather than based around the problem-solving, objectifying, separated sense of ego. I don't know if that makes sense, but if it does, keep going with me, because I'm going to deconstruct that and therefore hopefully explain to you why hypnotherapy works. So let's consider the concept of thinking to start with. And then we'll get onto the concept of problem solving. And then we'll get onto what's going on in hypnosis. And then we'll get onto why that makes a difference. What's the difference that makes the difference, if you like. If I can remember those steps, because I'm not doing this with a script, I'm just doing this. So thought processes. What's going on when you think? And what has this got to do with anything? Pendulum. In order to think, about something, in order to come to conclusions about something. The key is in the word thing. In order to think about something, you have to distance yourself from it as if you were an observer, as if you were an impartial observer that sat outside of the system of the thing, who could observe it without influencing it and therefore learn things about it. And that might be things that are useful. It might be things that you learn about. It might be things about other people or things about the world. Anything. Thing. So the way that we do this is the way that our mind automatically thinks, I believe, which is to objectify the world, to make things into me and it. And the me, the I, is what I guess Freud was talking about when he talked about the ego. Now, in actual fact, he didn't name it the ego. It was the English translation of it that made it the ego. I think he called it the ish, the I, okay? So, and he talked about the id, the S, which is the it. So in order to think about something, what we do is we take a step back from it mentally in our mind, and we review as if we could do so without influencing what it is that we're thinking about. We take a step back, we neutralize, we take away all the nuances, and we generalize, because we can't think of lots and lots of things at the same time. And so we kind of focus upon the bits which appear most important to us in the moment, and then come to conclusions. So how do we address problems? Because what happens is these conclusions that we come to, they become part of our story, yeah? The metaphors of how the world works. They become part of our worldview. They become part of the way that we understand the world, the way that we understand ourselves, the way that we understand other things, other people, and the kind of the hooks that we hang the framework of our existence upon. So basically, when we think about things, what we're doing is we're creating rules of thumb that allow us to go about our day-to-day business, yeah? To get stuff done without having to think of a billion things every time we make a choice or a movement, or even to do things which don't require conscious thought. You know, this is how we end up being able to learn new things and then kind of almost forget we've learned them because they just kind of go on autopilot. So it's a very useful thing. I'm not saying it's a very useful thing. So let's now consider how that relates to problems, a problem that we have in our life. Because this is where hypnotherapy comes in, right? Someone comes to therapy because they've run out of ideas themselves how to make progress. So someone addresses a problem usually in a very similar manner. So they objectify the problem, they kind of work out, or I work out in my mind, what are the criteria of the problem, what are the unique factors of the problem, What are the kind of things that I can break it down into, the building blocks of the problem, let's say? We objectify the problem, and then we try as hard as we can to think of ways to fix it. But we're doing so, again, from that ego, from that objectifying sense of mind. So we look at the problem as if it's out there, as if we weren't part of it, sort of, how someone else might fix it, maybe. And we come to conclusions, okay? And then we try those conclusions. And it turns out that they don't work very well, because it turns out that we are in the system that we are trying to objectify. So sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But the thing is, we're always within the framework of the worldview that we have created for all things in our life. Yeah, so we're approaching the issue of problem solving kind of in the same way that we approach most understandings, right? This is our default way of thinking. Okay, so now let's get on to psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, any therapy. You problem solve, you problem solve, you problem solve, it's not working. For whatever reason, you still kind of feel the same or act the same. It's almost as if there is a part of you that wants to do the problem solving, but there's another part of you which is running in the other direction, sort of idea. You run out of ideas. You don't know what to do. That is the moment normally where people go approach a therapist. It's like, and there is this connotation with therapy that somehow I am faulty, that somehow there's a problem inside of me that I am unable to fix. And it's very easy to diagnose that and say there's something wrong with me, right? Personally, my premise is that people are working really, really well based upon their worldview, based around the fact that they are objectifying the world. So what's going on in hypnotherapy? Unfortunately, I can't talk to you about all the other types of therapy, but I can tell you why hypnotherapy works in my story. So, the reason why the problem solving didn't work is because you are objectifying the problem. You are looking at it as if you are an observer, whereas in actual fact you are a participant. You are looking at it from a distance, which makes it wafer thin, which makes it generalizable, which makes it compartmentalizable, which gives you the ability to run rules of thumb which are based around your understanding and meaning of the world, right? But all of which is underpinning the problem in the first place that you're trying to solve. So it's like you're trying to get out of a box which you've been in all your life. I don't know if you've ever come across, there is a story, it's, I think it's Plato that talks about this. I think it's Plato. But anyway, the anecdote is about a fire in a cave. And someone has grown up in a cave, chained to the floor, and behind them is a fire. So they're looking at the wall. There's stuff going on in the background, but they're looking at the wall. So they are seeing shadows and light reflected from the fire. And from that, they build up a story of what the world is, because that is their evidence. Now, we all know that obviously this cave isn't representative of the world, but to that individual who's grown up in that, that's its entirety. Yeah. So, back to the pendulum. What is hypnosis? We thought, in actual fact, that hypnosis was the tiring of the optic nerve originally. Okay, so people thought that if you focused on a pendulum, or you focused on the flame of a candle, then the optic nerve would get tired. Your eyelids would become tired. And it was observed that people would go into trance. So they concluded that this must be a function of the tiring of the optic nerve. That's where the whole idea of the pendulum came from. But the thing is, we know, if you look at stage shows, that people are in hypnosis with their eyes wide open. Okay, I've had clients, have the most extraordinary experience when part way through a hypnosis session, I ask them to open their eyes and they look around their own room, or they look around where we are, almost like they have a new set of eyes. So what's going on when we're focusing the eyes on something, when we're allowing the optic nerve to become fatigued, is that we are focusing on one thing in particular to the point where everything else goes quiet. Our brain is wrapping around something, okay? It happened to be a little crystal ball or the flame, but actually it could be anything. The point is that it is wrapped around one idea to the point where everything else goes calmer, goes quieter. So one definition of hypnosis is the bypass of the critical faculty of the conscious mind. Okay, the part of you that thinks it runs the ship, that believes it's the captain of your organism, the part of you where all the chatter comes from, the part of you that thinks it's making the decisions. So one definition of hypnosis is that we are bypassing that part of you that thinks it's making the decisions and allowing you to reverberate with everything else. That's quite a complicated definition. And it doesn't always feel correct. Because for me, when I go into a state of hypnosis, I am not abandoning my critical faculty. I can feel my critical faculty. For me, what is going on when I put myself into a state of hypnosis is that I am shifting from that I, it relation to me. So I'm no longer looking at myself, considering myself from a position behind myself. I'm no longer objectifying myself and therefore coming to conclusions about problems which are based around the fact that I'm not in the problem, I'm observing the problem. And I am shifting from that objectifying approach to me, whatever you want to call me, to a position where I am relating to me. Now, I don't know if you can sit with that for a moment. Because you see, people have been talking for years about stop thinking about stuff and get in the present moment. The present moment is where the magic lies, okay? When you're thinking about stuff, you're either in the past or you're in the future, but you're never in the now, okay? But how do you think about the present moment, right? By definition, the act of thinking about the present moment objectifies the present moment, so you're detached from it. Which means you're not in the present moment. You're in the past somehow. You're judging yourself. And none of the magic lies there. So how do you get into the present moment? How do you get into that position of non-objectification of yourself, of relating to yourself. And for me, that's what the experience of hypnosis is. I can't even label it as an experience, unfortunately. Get this. Because to have an experience, you have to be observing what's occurring and labeling it. So you're already back out of relating and back in objectification, I, it. If you've never experienced hypnosis, maybe you've got a cat or a dog or a hamster, a pet. Even if you don't, maybe you can relate to the idea of meeting one on the street and kind of having a communication with it. The reason I draw up the idea of a pet is because you can do this with a person. It's very easy to do it with a person. It's the same process. But with a person, we kind of feel as though we have to keep up appearances, right? Whereas with a pet, we don't. As a very, very simple example, you may find someone who stutters or stammers with individuals, but when they talk to their pet, there's no stammer or stutter. Yeah, very, very illuminating, instant issue. So if you've got a cat or a dog or a hamster, a parrot, or if not, if you can find one on the street that's prepared, just briefly, to have a conversation with you. If you center yourself, even if you just take a couple of breaths, and you focus your emotions on the animal, you give it your attention, and you speak to the cat, the dog, the animal. And this is hard for me to put into words because by labeling it cat, dog, animal, person, I have no choice but to objectify them. But if you can, in the moment of this occurring, connect with the animal. Here you are, sort of thing. I see you. And here I am. And we are going to relate. And you've no idea what the animal's going to do, obviously. It doesn't matter. What matters is you relating to this other thing. And you can do that practically in real life, or you can imagine it, because it's the same thing in actual fact. When you find that position of relating, then bring that to yourself. Exactly the same feeling, exactly the same approach, exactly the same level of freedom. Bring it to whatever you consider I. Maybe it's your heart, maybe it's your emotions, maybe it's your brain, maybe it's your physical body. I don't know, but whatever makes sense to you. And maybe you have a sense of that. Maybe you have a visual field of that. Maybe you have an image in your mind. Whatever works for you. But if you bring that to yourself, you are relating with you. I am relating with I. And when I record this video right now, I am relating with you. And I don't know who it is that is you. But nonetheless, I am relating with it. And you'll probably have talked like even my voice has gone quieter, slower,
calmer, more settled. I'm not trying to second guess myself. There's still an element of me which is objectifying. There's still an element of me which needs to know what to say in 10 seconds time. So it's not as if I am entirely 100% in the present moment, but let's say I'm 90% there. I'm within my felt, I'm going to have to use the word experience. For me, that is a fantastic way of explaining to someone the way that it feels in hypnosis, and therefore the reason, or one of the reasons, why hypnotherapy works. So let's talk about the difference between hypnotherapy and meditation, for example. And again, this is just in my experience. But in meditation, what's going on is I am trying as hard as I can to quieten my mind. I'll do that by maybe following my breath, or by imagining the thoughts in my head evaporating, turning clear and lifting up to the sky, or by noticing the sensations in my body, or by quietening my mind, noticing when words and thoughts come across, patting them on the head and releasing them, thanking them and letting them go, in the attempt to find a level of quiet inside of my mind. Okay, that's what I would consider to be meditation. And then to discover what comes up, as if I'm opening myself up to the rest of me to speak its wisdom. Something like that. In hypnosis, what I'm doing is something similar, but with a power of intention. So I'm not quietening all and discovering what may or may not come up. Because, of course, when it comes up, instantly I'm back in the objectifying mind. Instead, what I'm doing is, with a sense of choice, of intention, I am leading myself through a ceremony, maybe the pendulum, maybe focusing on a spot in the corner of the wall, maybe on my breathing. I am stilling my body. I'm inviting my mind to join that delightful sense of calm, and I am opening up to relate to myself, but with an intention. And this intention is very important, right? We talk a lot about intention, about participant and observer, even in what we consider to be physics these days. So the reason why hypnosis helps you solve your own problems, the reason why client-centered therapy works, the reason why it was always intended that free association psychotherapy works, is to get you out of your current head, to get you out of your current story, and consider the possibility of other stories. By releasing that objectifying sense of intellectual processing, and by relating with yourself rather than objectifying yourself, you find a level of harmony with yourself which you cannot find when objectifying. And I have kind of no choice but to try and explain in words the feeling of that. But even in doing that, I have to objectify the experience. So it's far richer than this, right? When I objectify, I make things wafer thin. But my objectification of the experience is of a sense of heightened awareness of your being, of sort of facilitating an information superhighway, a mega thick fiber optic cable to all parts of my organism, and a releasing of the story that grips me within my perception. And that, for me, is presence. People spend their whole life trying as hard as they can to get to presence. Because even in this explanation of what it is that I am doing, I haven't entirely released the objectifying critical faculty of the conscious mind. I'm aware of it. And so there's always another layer of the onion to peel back. But I bring a sense of gratitude and curiosity and thankfulness to the fact that I'm still aware that that part of me is there, that it's quiet, that it is in harmony with everything rather than trying to rule the roost. Because I need it, because I'm coming with a sense of intention. And so I don't want that part of me to completely disappear. It's a really, really useful part of me. It's just that I don't want it to hog the limelight. I want everything to be shined upon with my magic torch. And so the act of relating to myself, for you to relate to all of you, it's a little bit like when you first fall in love, right? And you no longer see the other person from a very critical point of view, okay? That comes later, reality comes later, but in that moment you kind of go, oh, right? That's kind of what a state of flow is, okay? It's the same thing. If you were to look at the most exquisite, relatable work of art, or you were creating something that in your head just feels like you, and for a moment you forget that talking part of you and you just act like a perfectly well-oiled, lubricated machine, and everything feels right. Well, when you get into the depth of hypnotic presence, that's almost what it feels like, okay? And that's the best I can put it into in words, because by definition, by using words, I have to, what's the word? Dilute the reality. The reality for me is deep. It's very, very deep. But even the word deep doesn't do it. But I hope you can see that by transporting yourself to a position where you are relating with yourself, just as you might relate to an animal, so that judgmental side of you, maybe it's somewhere far, far away, but the bulk of you is in harmony with you. Those stories about what it is to be you, about what you're good at, what you're bad at, what works, what doesn't work, all of those parts are integrating into a far, far larger experience by an act of intention. Now, I don't really know how far an act of intention can go. I have seen the most extraordinary things through acts of intention, okay? We all know the stories of well, maybe we don't, but there are stories of mothers who can apparently literally lift cars with the same strength of their body that normally couldn't lift more than a couple of bags of shopping because their child is underneath the car, okay? I have experienced times, and it sounds ridiculous, it sounds evangelical, and I don't know what's going on. Maybe there is an act of compliance, maybe there is an act of social peer group pressure in this. I really don't know, but I have seen people, when I have just simply put my hand on the area between their shoulder blades, and they've done like an S shape and they have tumbled down. So there is something about energy that I cannot express in words that comes from the power of intention. So I'm certain that my explanation of what's going on in hypnosis is incomplete. But the sheer act of bringing that sense of intention to a state, if you want to call it a state, to a choice of a different way of relating to yourself, well, it brings up different ways of solving as well as different ways of thinking about you. It expands enormously the concept of what agency you have as an individual, what potency you have, what options exist, what freedom you have. Because you're no longer pushing against yourself, pushing against your problems with a objectifying mind, with a critical faculty. And instead you are opening up to all things. The sheer act of being able to access that sense of presence in itself is awe-inspiring. You feel complete, I guess. It's a sort of a cliched way that it's impossible to put into words. But because you are no longer objectifying yourself, your problem, your challenge, the way that you fit in the world, what it is to be an I, what it is to deal with the world of it, of other. You're no longer objectifying any of that, and you are instead relating. So to get back to this, and the thought that it was tiring the optic nerve, in a hypnosis session, in a hypnotherapy session, you found this state where you are relating to yourself. Hypnosis is not a state of eyelids. You can open your eyes. Now, the way that people react is obviously always going to be contextually appropriate. So when I ask someone to open their eyes midway through a hypnotherapy session, they're still going to fit within the context of the system within which the two of us are working. But the look on someone's face, the way that their eyes are wider, there is a sense And I cannot generalize this because everybody's going to be different, but the times that I do it with people, I can see the joy or energy or shen or life, whatever you want to call it, shining from their eyes. In awe, in beauty, in connection, in amazement, in wonderment, in curiosity, in thankfulness, in gratitude, as if a bag of bricks has been taken off their back. Because somehow or other, that has become a transcendental experience for the individual. Because we're always seeing our world through that objectifying mechanism. Even when we talk to someone who we know very, very well, our default state is to do so from this I-it perspective. And when you can access a method for doing that from an I-thou, I-you, relative experience, it feels wild. Your understanding of what you thought you knew, of your capacity, of your potency, of your power, of your connection, of your understanding of all things, has to be re-examined some way or other. So the reason why hypnotherapy works is because it gets you out your story. It gets you into flow. But in a predictable, repeatable way. Now, when you repeat it, the experience is going to be different because presence is different. Yeah, you're going to come with your current self, however you want to describe that. You're going to come with an intention which is based around whatever you are at that moment, because we're always changing. But that ability to access the relative, the relational sense of self is magic. It's magic. It's the sheer definition of beauty, because it's so calm and complete and exciting and joyful. It is, you see, when you relate with yourself, you relate with everything else. So it becomes a religious experience, a euphoric experience. Your ego has relaxed, and you have a sense of humble potency, maybe, is that a word? Of all things and nothing, of the way that you were seeing, and instead what you can now begin to feel, that cannot be put into words. The depth of experience that cannot be objectified. An acceptance of these two different ways of relating to yourself that are both useful, that are both great in different circumstances. Yeah, I don't want to be doing my tax return from a relational state of mind, right? I don't want to be thinking about, though the world is a beautiful, amazing, ethereal thing, right? I need to talk in facts and figures. If I'm doing experiments, okay, where I need data, where I need facts, well, then I need to be in that objectifying state of mind. But to truly experiment, to truly understand what is, you need the strength of that other perspective, that relationship perspective upon what it is that you think is knowledge, what it is that you think you are. And so through hypnotherapy, weirdly, you end up being able to access both. So it's like having a sudden ability to access a mega complement to what you thought was kind of the only way of thinking. Yeah? So for me, it's a little bit like meditation on steroids. It's meditation with a toolbox attached, with a whole repertoire of possibilities that are accessible the moment that you choose to do so. Yeah? So I told you to do it by doing it through this idea of, communicating with an animal, just because that's an easy way of finding yourself in non-judgmental communion with something other than you. So it's a way of not objectifying it and relating to it. Another way that I have talked about in another video is to focus upon your fingers. You can, people use the power of intention either to point their fingers or to kind of choose something and press their fingers together. Now, for me, that's still a metaphor. It's a ceremony to bring you to that sense of relation with everything. But maybe it's a thing in itself. I'm not clever enough to understand that. I don't know what it is that I don't know. But another way, if that idea of, relating to an animal, if that doesn't fit, or relating with a human being, if that is tough, you can focus on your fingers. You can focus on the felt sense of your fingers, and I'm not asking you to think about your fingers. I'm asking you to focus on what it feels almost inside those fingers. And maybe you can already, if you're doing this along with me, maybe you can already feel the blood flowing, the pulse in the fingers. And if you can make a gesture with the fingers almost as if you were going to press on a light switch on a wall, there's sort of just a light sense of tension towards the end. And as you do that, you can think about and observe and feel the temperature of the air surrounding the fingers, and you can become aware of the space between those two fingers. If these two fingers are sort of 10 centimeters apart, facing forwards, you can focus your attention on both fingers at the same time by looking at the gap between the fingers and expanding your peripheral vision. And then once you've got a really good, deep, calm, felt sense of what it is to be in the fingers, and you've got your attention somehow on both of those fingers with your peripheral vision, well then, if you place your attention 2 or 3 centimeters in front of the two fingers, I don't know about you, but for me, that has an extraordinary sense of calm attached to it. So for me, that also brings me to that relational sense of self. The further you go down this, weirdly, the less you know. Because the more you kind of come to the conclusion that there is to know, and therefore how much less of that you understand. When I put this on video, there's a sense of vanity to it, okay? There is a sense of ego to my passing on this information. there's a sense of sort of ambition in my wanting to express this information to you. But if I, as I said before, relate to you, whoever you are, whilst I'm doing the video, and I don't know if you can bring a sense of relating to me whilst you're listening to this or watching this. There is a shift in your body. It is tangible. And who knows, maybe it's entirely in your imagination. Maybe this entire thing is just me shifting one metaphor to another metaphor. I don't know. But when I do that, I find it incredibly useful, incredibly freeing, incredibly powerful. And I can be in harmony with you, with all things. And my definition or understanding or imagery of what that is can shift. But the harmony remains the same. And that for me is presence. So I hope that explains why, in my story, hypnotherapy works. Because you're giving yourself a whole series of new ways of looking and relating to yourself, to your issues, without separating from them. Yeah? The reason why it's so hard consciously to fix your problems is because in objectifying it, you are assuming that you're not part of it and you're trying to fix it. You're trying to fix something which the likelihood isn't even rational in itself, right? The problem is probably based around the fixed ideas, the policies, the rules, the procedures which are running in the rest of you. And so the idea of being able to critically fix it is an oxymoron to a certain extent, right? If you were gonna fix it critically, the likelihood is you would have already done so. When someone reaches the point where they are asking for help outside of themselves, the reason is because this critical way of thinking about it hasn't worked. So this gives you a way of relating with yourself, of getting out of your story and considering that all things are changing, that you have a part in that, that you are not completely powerful, that you're not entirely powerless, and that there is a friction there somewhere between the two that you can start to observe. And of course, when you step out of your story, you step out of your ego to a certain extent, then you are less concerned about how you fit within the rest of the world, because you suddenly understand that you naturally fit within the rest of the world, and therefore it's freer and easier to follow your intuition, to follow your understanding, because you can see the harmony of the whole system rather than feeling as if you're fighting against the system. There's 1,000 ways that you can bring this as a really useful metaphor, even if it is only a metaphor. And I don't think I'm ever going to know if it's more than a metaphor. Maybe when I die, maybe when the chips are down, I get to look at it and go, was that right or was that wrong? That I know it can't be entirely right, because how could it possibly be? And maybe at the end of the day, it's completely wrong. But it's so useful. It's such a wonderful way of relating with that thing which your normal part of your mind considers to be it. That even if it's completely wrong, it's so valuable. Yeah. All right, I'm going to stop. 54 minutes. Wow, that's a good chatter. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for playing along with me. I hope that's interesting. I hope it might be massive food for thought. I hope it might get you to consider hypnotherapy. Get in touch. Have a look at what other people think hypnotherapy is. I assure you, you'll find a lot of definitions. That's why it took, I reckon it must be about 6 years now, for me to be able to express this in a way that sits well in my stomach. Because trying to enunciate something which is a felt sense is very, very hard to do, and then to relate that with the objectified world so that you can understand what it is to problem solve. That's why it's taken me such a long time. And I'm sure that there are other explanations that are valid in their own way. And then they're all stories anyway, so it's whichever stories you relate to. But I hope it might get you to the conclusion that it's worthwhile exploring a little more deeply. Yeah, get in touch. I would love to understand from people that have already experienced hypnosis if what I'm talking about is relatable. I hope the whole thing is relatable. Or if your experience was different. And if you've never experienced hypnosis and you want to give it a try, just contact me, because I will have a conversation with anybody. The world fascinates me. So I hope our conversation has shifted your perception of yourself. It's got you somehow or other to a state of improved harmony with yourself. All right, thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If it resonates with you, then follow my podcast. I would also personally be really grateful if you might wish to leave a quick rating. It genuinely helps others to discover the podcast. If you personally would like more guided meditations, you want some deeper insights, you'll find all my links in the description. If you prefer a more visual boost, then you might want to check out my YouTube channel called Authentic Life Hypnosis. And if you're looking to do some deeper work that goes beyond one-way audio, then obviously you're very welcome to reach out. Equally, if you have any questions, I'm here to help. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.